Hello, welcome back to Learn Astrology with Mary. My name's Mary English. You can find me at maryenglish.com. You can find me at Mary English, interestingly, on Twitter. And I've got a Facebook page, and I'm discoverable. And as I said last week, this week I was going to talk a little bit about Indigo birth charts. And before I even tell you what the astrology of indigo is, I'm going to let you know what an indigo is. Now, we need to go back in time to a lady called Nancy Ann Tapp, who wrote a book called Understanding Your Life Through Colour. I think it was self-published. It was a very interesting book. And she had a condition called synesthesia, where she would taste colours and see images. So basically her senses were muddled up. And I can't remember how old she was, but I think she was in her 20s, and she went to a yoga class, and the teacher said to her, we're going to do some work now looking at people's auras. And she thought, oh, that's really interesting, how to look at auras. And when the teacher described to her what looking at auras was like, Nancy realised, well, crikey, I've been doing that all of my life. And since being a teeny kiddie, she had looked at people and seen each person as a different colour. Now, it's not the same as seeing an aura, mind. Looking at auras is slightly different. But what Nancy saw when she saw people, she saw them surrounded by a colour, and that colour represented their life purpose. Anyway, you can Google Nancy Ann Tapp. She is on the internet. I think she was a Leo. I'm sure she was. And she's unfortunately she died a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. And she lived in America, and she was friends with Lee Carroll and Jan Tobler, who then later on wrote a book called The Indigo Children. I think it was called that, or The Indigos, or something. I can't remember the title of the flipping book now. But the thing is, Nancy Ann Tapp, because of the condition that she had, would felt that it was important that people understood what their colour was. And you don't need to be able to see it to understand what your colour you are. She sort of describes the different colours, and you can work out what sort of colour you are from her book Understanding Life Through Colour. Nothing to do with zodiac signs. There's nothing to do with that at all. But she maintains that she was working in a hospital and was asked to see a child who was dying, and she looked at this particular little babe, and she noticed that its colour, its life purpose colour, was indigo, and she thought that was a new colour that had just come in and replaced magenta. And as I say, so she, when she was looking at people, saw their life purpose as a colour. So she'd see someone, and I think she used to think she was yellow. And a yellow person is get out there and do it, and not shy, and and all the rest of it. But this new colour was indigo, and it was one she hadn't seen before. And this was in the late 70s. And then a little way on, now we're going a bit forwards in time, it's around about that late 80s. Jan Tobler and Lee Carroll, who I think in their other jobs in life work with an ascended master and write a lot about that. In their lectures and stuff, noticed that there were different types of children, and because they were mates with Nancy Ann Tapp, and they knew about this indigo thing, they then came up with the idea that children were different, and that a new range or style or type of child was being born. And rather swiftly, when the idea, well, not the but rather swiftly after Hay House published the book, The Indigo Children, it went very, very quickly around the internet, and it whizzed its way eventually to the UK. It only took a few weeks, and people talk about indigo children. What are indigos? What are they all about? Websites started up. But what I must point out is that nobody was even using the word indigo before Nancy Ann Tapp. She really was the instigator of the expression and the terminology and everything. So any research that you do on indigos, please ignore all of it, and trust me when I tell you that Nancy Ann Tapp was the lady that actually developed at and understood, because she had this ability herself to see people's life purpose as a colour, and the various different colours would come and go in her lifetime. I think she lived to be something like being in her 70s, so she wasn't terribly young when she died, and she wasn't terribly old either, but she had a good maybe 50-60 years, we could say, of life experience seeing people and their colours. Yeah. So I got caught up in it working with a particular client whose child was having lots of issues at school, and I'd read about Indigo Children, and it resonated really very well for me and my child. And I think some of the key things about Indigo is they don't like being told what to do, they don't understand it neither, but forget all of those things. The important thing is, when I looked at this particular child's birth chart and his mother was tearing her hair out, I thought, gosh, isn't that an interesting chart shape? All the planets are on one side of the circle. Now, in lesson number 1, we discussed chart shapes. So if you're listening to this now and you haven't listened to my first podcast, I would urge you to go back to the first podcast when I talk about chart shape. Because the thing about indigos is that they have a specific chart shape, and it's very clustered, and all the planets are on one side of the circle. Anyway, but this client that I was treating, their child, was having all these difficulties, and I constructed his chart. I thought, this is a bit unusual to have the planets like this. And I then looked at and analysed all the other children in his year at school, and their charts were all one-sided as well, bar 1 or 2 of them. So this is a class of about 30 kids. I think maybe 1 or 2 of them didn't have one-sided charts. And I got quite into it at that point. And then I also discovered is the wrong word, but I also noticed that 2 outer planets in the late 70s became conjunct, and those 2 planets were Uranus and Neptune, and they only conjunct once every 170 years. So it isn't every day of the week that those 2 planets go together in the same sign. And these indigo people also had this conjunction in their chart, which they would do because that's when they started going conjunct, late 70s, sort of the punk era. And indigos themselves talk about there being different waves. You know, there's the wave 1, wave 2, wave 3. There's lots of arguments and discussion about indigos. It goes on forever. Anyway, stay with me on this one. So 2 outer planets become conjunct, Uranus and Neptune. And interestingly, one of the conjunctions was during the Renaissance, which was an artistic thing in Italy. The Renaissance was, the rebirth of art. And Uranus and Neptune conjuncting like that has an interesting effect, is that the right word, with human beings on the planet. Now, if you want to understand outer planet conjunctions, then go get the book Cosmos and Psyche by Richard Tarnas. He can explain far better than me the outer planet conjunctions, oppositions and squares. But what I'm talking about is conjunction. That's the 2 planets together in the same sign. And in this case, 2 outer planets became conjunct. Now, interestingly, Indigo Children's parents, because to be born in the 70s, your parents have got to be born a bit earlier than that. Be born in the late 70s. Interestingly, an awful lot of Indigo Children's parents were born when Pluto and Uranus were conjunct in the sign of Virgo, which started round about the early 1960s. It's not in my case, I was born 2 years prior to that, in 1960, but 1962 Uranus and Pluto became conjunct. So a Uranus-Pluto generation gave birth to children with a Uranus-Neptune conjunction. Okay, so again, this is 2 generations, 2 quick generations, one after the other, with an outer planet conjunction. And outer planets don't conjunct that often because their orbits are different. They're, it's a bit like, 2 cars on the motorway aren't going to be travelling together at the same, you're going to work every day. You're not going to be travelling at the same route as somebody else every day. It's, every now and again that might happen, and it's a similar thing in astrology. So this outer planet thing with this, let's go back to Indigos. They've got Uranus and Neptune conjunct. So what does that mean in English? So Uranus is the planet of freedom and erratic happenings, and Neptune is your psychic planet. And if you've got those two planets conjunct, which the whole of the Indigo generation do, and they span from 1979 to 1999, there's a few that it can happen with in the early 2000s, but not many, because by the time we get to 2000 and something, I don't know, it's 2003, I think, the two outer planets have started to move away from each other. And as I mentioned in my intro to this in last week's episode, that if you are a winter-born baby, anything from the sign Virgo all the way through to Pisces, you are more likely, if you're born between 79 and 99, to have very much a one-sided cluster or bowl chart. Now, when I started researching this, and trust me, it was proper research. I mean, I'm not being employed by some enormous organisation to do it, but research in that I didn't just come up with the idea, I checked. And I went to an Indigo forum and I asked anybody that thought they were an Indigo, would they please send me their birth chart? And initially I had 100 people reply to my posting, and of those 100 people, 95 of them had one-sided charts, 5 of them didn't. So I thought it was a pretty high percentage of people with one-sided charts and outer planet conjunctions thinking that they are Indigos, because a lot of people will email me and ask me that, am I an Indigo? Well, if you have to ask me if you're an Indigo, you're probably not one. If you want my confirmation you're an Indigo, go and research it yourself. I am not going to be making, like the Pope, you are an Indigo, so please go out into the world. I had so many emails from people when my article was first published on my website, and it's called The Birth Charts of Indigo Children. Google it, you can find it. If you find it on any other website, it's not the one I wrote. Somebody's nicked it. It got stolen so many times. But I wrote an article called The Birth Charts of Indigo Children, explained about this one-sided thing, and I've written a lot more since then. I have written a book about it. The Astrology of Indigos is called, and it's available as a Kindle download. Okay, so we've got two outer planets conjunct. You're a winter-born baby from roundabout Pisces through to, roundabout Virgo going forwards through to Pisces. You're less likely to have a one-sided chart if you're Aries through to Leo, because your sun sign will be opposite the conjunction that starts in a sign before Capricorn, Sagittarius. The conjunction started in Sagittarius and peaked in Capricorn, so the actual conjunction of Uranus and Neptune was 1990. And I think Saturn was in the mix as well. And then by 1993, Saturn had moved into Aquarius. So if you are a early 90s Bab, you are going to have a pretty much clustered chart with a whole host of planets all squished in there if you're a winter baby. So what does that mean? So what happens if you're an Indigo? You know, are you the chosen one? Are you going to rule the world? No. However, your life experience is going to be very different from previous. So what's the difference? What makes an Indigo different or special or unusual or not mainstream? Do you know, I think part of it is that Indigos are extremely intuitive, but they don't always use that intuition, and they don't always trust themselves. There's so much lack of self-confidence in some Indigo people, and they feel much better in a group rather than on their own. They're not ones that are likely to want to become hermits. And if you've got your conjunction in Capricorn, which your 90s born Babs are going to have, Saturn's going to be scooting around, you know, either in Capricorn or in Aquarius. You're going to feel very responsible for lots of things that are going on in the world, and then sort of feel powerless about being able to change them. So I always advise Indigos, never mind about what's going on in the world, really truly do what you truly want to do. Don't do stuff to please other people. It just is not going to help you. Anyway, this isn't an advice to indigos. Gosh, I'm going to turn to that if I'm not careful. It's just how to spot an indigo child. I've had so many arguments with, I did used to have arguments with people on forums about um, people telling me, well, there must have been thousands of, hundreds of millions of people born with that conjunction. Yes, there are, and there will be, but not all of those people born during that astrological conjunction are going to question it or even want to know about it, because they're just perfectly happy with what they're doing. But if you're unhappy with how your life is, sometimes finding out that you're indigo, if you want to call yourself that, might allow you the space or the mindset to think, well, I'm not weird. Because an unfortunate, see, I'll explain the maths of this one a bit more. The parents of indigos, so the people that were born with Pluto and Uranus conjunct, themselves, their generation developed ADD and ADHD. Okay, they're the ones that dreamt it up. I'm going to blame anybody. They did it. Okay, it wasn't ADD and ADHD back in the day. Never even existed. It was developed by that generation, the Pluto Uranus conjunct in Virgo generation, because Virgo is the sign of health and healing and all the rest of it. And so a considerable amount of parents have a diagnosis for their child of ADD and ADHD and goodness knows what, when in fact their child has nothing wrong with them. And I'm not blaming the parents here, but the child just has a different way of doing stuff and a different way of learning. And the key always with any child is to find out what learning style they have. So go Google NLP, because you've got people that are kinesthetic, visual and audible, and a lot of, not all, but a considerable number of indigos, pretty much a lot of kinesthetic, whilst their parents, a lot of them are visual and need to see. The kinesthetic child learner needs to touch stuff. Audible, they're quite strong and audible as well, indigos. They need to hear things as well, so I'm so glad you're listening in now. So the I mentioned it a bit in my article as well, the ADD and ADHD thing, is it true? Was it just invented by drugs companies so they could flog you loads of Ritalin? Or is it an actual condition? And even if it were an actual condition, do you need to have that as a label? Does it make you feel any better? Do you get any better resources or care? Don't know. That's an open question, yeah. But it was that generation that dreamt it up, and it never existed before. And I do get pretty worked up about people that will label their children with a condition. Your child's a child. Your child isn't a this, isn't a that, isn't a label. So be wary of that. And if you have been given that label yourself, then please unadopt it. It's not part of who you are. But what you need to look at, if you classify yourself as indigo or you want to investigate indigo, please find two things in your chart that will help you. And I write about this in my book, The Astrology of Indigos. Two things. Find out what sign your Mercury is in. Is it in the same sign as your sun sign? If it isn't, you're going to have to work hard on your Mercury and understand it. Okay. And your Jupiter. Find what sign your Jupiter is in and find out what your beliefs are and how to satisfy them for yourself, and how to the sign your Jupiter's in is how you believe or what you believe in, or because everybody believes in different things. There's no such thing as we all believe the same thing. We don't. We believe different things, and your Jupiter will guide you in that. And so find out those two things: your sign of your Mercury and your sign of your Jupiter, and obviously where it's located in your chart and all the rest of it. So that's just a little quick burble. I'm sorry if I'm talking rubbish this week, but that's a quick burble about indigo birth charts. The article is on my website. To get to it, you'd have to go to maryenglish.com and scroll down a bit, and you'll see there's a link there. It says indigos. Click on that. It'll take you directly to the article, the birth charts of indigo children. You can read it, because there you'll see the picture of the charts themselves and my process in finding out about it. It is an astrological thing. It isn't an invention. There has been a whole generation of people born under a specific astrological conjunction that will not occur again for another 170 years, and go off and get Cosmos and Psyche by Richard Tarnas. That'll explain it a lot more. So that's a little introduction this week. I haven't decided what I'm going to do next week, so I can't tell you now. But I do hope you've enjoyed listening this week. I might expand a bit more about indigos next week. I don't know, actually. Send me an email. Let me know what you'd like to learn a bit more about astrology. But there'll be something interesting for you next week, and I do hope you tune in. Have a fab week. Bye-bye now.